A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. My name is Cam Edwards. It is great to have you with us today. On the program here in just a matter of moments, our friend Steve Gutowski of the Washington Free Beacon will be with us talking about some of the latest news from around the nation. A little bit of good news as far as our Second Amendment rights are concerned. You know, on Saturday, we saw the new revised guidance by the Department of Homeland Security as to essential members of the workforce. And this new guidance says that firearms manufacturers, basically the firearms industry, whether it's manufacturers, distributors, retailers, firearms and ammunition, considered by the Department of Homeland Security to be critical, essential members of the workforce. Now, this is guidance. This is not a mandate from DHS, but we have already seen some pretty big developments as a result of that guidance. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy announcing on Monday afternoon that gun stores will be allowed to open. So they are open today in the Garden State for the first time in almost 2 weeks. Operating basically under the same rules that gun stores are operating in Pennsylvania. So they're operating by appointment only. They're doing a cleaning of the area where customers are in between visits. But gun stores are now open in New Jersey. Gun stores are also open in Los Angeles County, where Sheriff Alex Villanueva said he was persuaded to reopen gun stores after reading that DHS guidance. Now, we are still looking at a couple of states around the country that have not taken those steps. So far, Maine, New Mexico, New York would be those, and Washington State, still areas of the country where gun stores have either been ordered closed at the state level, or many counties are doing the same thing. We're also getting reports of pistol permits being suspended in some New York counties. So that's something that we're following very closely because even during this time of emergency, your rights do not disappear. We understand this is a time of emergency. There are going to be some rules and regulations in place to try to spread to limit the spread of the coronavirus. But there's one thing about imposing social distancing requirements. It's something else entirely. To declare that gun stores simply have to shut down. So we talk about that and more with a friend Stephen Gutowski of the Washington Free Beacon. Take a look and a listen. Stephen, how you doing, sir? Appreciate you coming on the program today.
Oh, I'm doing as good as could be expected, Cam. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. There's boy, I got to tell you, for people who are stuck inside their house, there's a lot of stuff to cover around the country in terms of our Second Amendment rights these days. We are now starting to see some reversals of the gun store closures that we've seen around the country. I think the Department of Homeland Security guidance that came out over this weekend, the revised guidance declaring that the firearms industry, from manufacturers, distributors, retailers on down, that they are considered by DHS to be essential parts of the workforce. I mean, that seems to be playing a huge role in undoing some of these closures in places like New Jersey and Los Angeles County.
Yeah, it does seem to have had a significant effect on those localities, which is kind of interesting to me because I think maybe they were just looking for sort of fig leaf to make these reversals because they have been sued in court and probably figured they were going to lose those cases, which they probably were. Because the DHS guidance is not binding. States don't have to listen to it. It's just basically what the federal government says it thinks the states should do. But clearly it has had an effect, whether just as a fig leaf or maybe some of these localities genuinely do just want to follow whatever the federal guidance is. So,
it's interesting. I mean, in some states I've seen that it's actually written in state law that they have to follow the guidance.
Okay.
And then other states, again, you're right. I mean, this is not a mandate coming from the federal government, but right. At the very least, I mean, it's some pretty strong, legal evidence that these organizations like Second Amendment Foundation, NRA, and others could have presented in court, and may still, I guess. I mean, I'm looking at a story. There are still a couple of jurisdictions around the country. New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexican reported this was yesterday. Confusion and anger on the right Only on the right, apparently, as gun shops not considered essential. Janet Mills, governor of Maine, has said that gun stores are not essential. So, we do still have, I think, Washington State, Jay Inslee as well. We still have a couple of states out there. But honestly, the other side of this, Stephen, is that we've seen some Democrat governors declare that gun stores are essential businesses. In Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker said gun stores could remain open. In Kentucky, Andy Beshear, the new Democrat governor there, said the gun stores could remain open. Ned Lamont in Connecticut. Were you surprised to see that we haven't actually had more anti-gun governors try to shut down gun stores?
This is an interesting question, right? I mean, there was certainly, at least for a short period of time here, a debate about whether or not they should shut them down as non-essential. Certainly a lot of the gun control groups have come out saying that they don't believe gun stores are essential. But, I mean, there's such serious constitutional questions that go along with that that are obviously going to draw lawsuits from all of the major gun rights groups, which they did, that perhaps part of it is just they don't really want that fight right now, especially because I think that they assume they would lose eventually. I mean, the only case we've seen come to any sort of conclusion thus far was the Pennsylvania state case, which the state Supreme Court there refused to take up, although it did. That's a 7-member court, and there was a dissent on that decision by 3 members of the court, strongly urging the governor to allow gun stores to be open at some level. And I think that's another part of it. Is like it's not as though the gun industry or the gun stores are demanding that they just be open to the public with no restrictions whatsoever and just have 100 people in the store at once. I think from what I've heard from the industry and from individual gun stores, they're more than happy to abide by, the same social distancing requirements that any other store that's open is allowed to. It's just that when you're closing the gun stores but keeping over it in like things like flower shops or alcohol stores, liquor stores, that becomes more of a question of constitutional protection. I mean, when you shut off the ability for Americans to buy a gun whatsoever, I mean, that's clearly an infringement on their Second Amendment rights, because if you can't purchase a gun, then how can you exercise your gun rights? And so I think the combination of the fact that the industry was more than willing to abide by social distancing requirements, and the fact that there are clear constitutional concerns with just shutting down all gun sales in a state, a lot of these governors didn't want to take that fight. Even the ones who seemed like they were willing to go in and fight it, like especially in New Jersey, where Governor Murphy seemed more than willing to try and uphold their initial decision. He said it was interesting because he implied that the federal guidance was just something he has to abide by. Mm-hmm. I don't know that that's the case in New Jersey, but either way, I think he didn't really want to drag that out in court. There was pretty much every major gun rights organization, the NRA, the Second Amendment Foundation, the Firearms Policy Coalition, and the local gun rights groups in New Jersey had all filed cases against the state over this, and so it was going to move quickly. Within a week or two, we were probably going to have a ruling from the federal judge on that shutdown, and so I think he perhaps saw what was coming.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because I mean, obviously, we as a country have never been in this situation before. At least, not for 100 years or more.
Years, yeah.
And so, there's probably not a lot of case law on the books. I suspect, what we saw in Pennsylvania, as you mentioned, those 3 dissenting justices on the state Supreme Court actually offered Governor Wolf a plan. They said, okay, listen, we think that there are some constitutional concerns here. What about allowing the gun stores to open, but, doing it by appointment only, cleaning they basically gave him the roadmap that he adopted and said, okay, these are going to be the rules for gun stores. Because you're right. I mean, look, even even with some of these rules now, like what we have in Virginia, right? We're not allowed to have public or private gatherings more than 10 people. And we've seen, obviously, that's had a huge impact on churches. But nobody is saying that churches have to shut down. Churches can move online if they want. They can, if they've got the space, they could, spread it out. So you've got 9 people in every Sunday school classroom watching, the service from inside the sanctuary. But when it comes to the gun stores, it's a very different thing, right? They were actually saying, nope, you've got to close down completely. And if you are not already a gun owner, then you're right. You don't have the right at this moment to acquire a firearm so you can keep and bear it. And that is, I think, a very different animal than even telling churches or restaurants, hey, you can't have more than 10 people in there. I just, look, all of these, if I were a constitutional law attorney right now, I mean, I'd be loving this because there are so many questions that are being raised by the restrictions that are being put in place that I think will ultimately get litigated. But what's interesting right now is with, the Los Angeles County Sheriff backing down, the New Jersey governor backing down, I guess we still, I think we still have the case, in Wake County, North Carolina, regarding the pistol purchase permits. But now that I'm thinking about it, I think the sheriff even announced yesterday in Wake County, North Carolina, that they would be resuming accepting the pistol purchase permit applications as well. I should probably go back and confirm that before I say that on the show. But
well, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. I mean, the same thing in that county in North Carolina. North Carolina requires you to get a permit to purchase a pistol, and so if you stop taking the applications for pistol purchase permits, then effectively you've banned the sale of pistols in locality, just like New Jersey did with shutting down all the gun stores and the background check system, so you can't legally buy a gun in New Jersey under the previous order. So it's hard to see how that would stand up in court because it's a blanket. Now, I mean, North Carolina, the sheriff's, Wake County Sheriff's excuse for that was that he just had too many applications at once, and he was limiting the size, the number of people in his department for safety reasons, and that's all understandable. But it's not a valid reason to just shut off people's access to firearms, especially right now, because the need is greater than ever for a lot of people, because you have, and perhaps these are justified things, right, given the crisis we're in, but you do have prisoners being released from prison. Now they're supposed to be
nonviolent,
which raises the question of why they necessarily have long prison sentences, whatever, but supposedly nonviolent criminals, but you're releasing the prison population for perhaps good reasons. You don't want, prisons, just like cruise ships or other isolated areas, can spread a virus very quickly. And so if you have people there that don't necessarily need to be there, there's some other punishment you could work out. Okay, understandable, but raises the risk of to the people in that community. And then also you have police departments announcing that they won't make certain arrests. I think North Carolina Highway Patrol isn't going to pull people over unless they have committed some sort of serious crime now. Like Philadelphia announced that they're not going to make arrests on a whole slew of different charges anymore. Same for the NYPD. So you have these areas where you're both releasing prisoners and publicly saying that you're not going to enforce certain laws anymore, essentially. Well, at least not going to take people to prison for them. Right.
Well, and I would add, too, the number of police officers that we're seeing around the country that are now testing positive. We've had 2 officers die in the New York Police Department. Several officers have died in Detroit. And there are hundreds of officers, that have tested positive in New Jersey. So, there's a reasonable concern, I think, about the staffing level of law enforcement as well. This was, it was interesting. So I was on this call yesterday with Everytown and Moms Demand Action. where they were bashing the new guidance from DHS and, blaming these spike in gun sales on NRA propaganda and, oh my gosh, it's horrible. They were completely unwilling to acknowledge, Stephen, that there are very legitimate reasons why people are concerned, perhaps not today, not right this second about their personal safety. But I mean, think about how weird our world has gotten just over the past couple of weeks. I don't think it's unreasonable for people to be concerned about the world getting even weirder 2 weeks from now.
Oh, absolutely. And it's certainly, we haven't seen the peak of this crisis yet, unfortunately. Things will get worse here before they get better. That doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be rioting or violence or anything like that. Hopefully there won't be. But it's also not impossible. And a lot of people, I think, realize that. And they want to be able to protect themselves. And I don't see why anyone should begrudge them of that right. I've lent guns to friends during this crisis who've asked for it. Unfortunately, I have friends in D.C. who have asked me to lend them guns, and I legally can't do that.
Right.
And it's especially hard for them to purchase guns. They effectively can't buy pistols at this point because the one FFL licensed dealer in DC is no longer taking transfers of pistols at this point because I believe, according to the Daily Caller, he was overwhelmed with new transfer requests. You can still purchase long guns across state lines. Mm-hmm. You have to abide with your local laws where you live, of course, so you can't buy guns that are illegal where you live just because you crossed the state line. And if you're in a place like DC, you would have to abide by their registration process and all that stuff. But you still can purchase across state lines if you buy a shotgun or a rifle. That's legal in your state. They call them long guns. You can't buy handguns across state lines without transferring it through an FFL first. So for basically New Jersey and DC for a while there, it was impossible to do because you couldn't make that transfer. And so it's been difficult to personally to see people who are in need, who can't obtain a firearm for themselves, even if they want to. I mean, even the people that I've lent guns to are in Virginia, where it's legal still for me to do that. Mm-hmm. But I did it because they wanted to purchase their own gun, which is the best case scenario. But unfortunately, the stock is very low right now. It's very difficult to buy a gun, even if you want one, even in a state where the stores are still open. Virginia here, they have the governor, Northam, Democrat. He hasn't declared gun stores to be essential. However, this was frankly very confusing. He issued a stay-at-home order yesterday, right? And it lists out a number of things. Basically, you can't leave your home except for a couple of exceptions. And so it seemed like he was shutting down everything that wasn't listed as an essential business, and he hadn't listed gun stores as essential. But it turned out that wasn't the case. And as long as you have fewer than 10 people in your store, even if you're not listed as an essential business, you can stay open in Virginia. So that would include gun stores are still open in the state, but their stock is non-existent at this point.
Right. Yeah. As with every other gun store out there, and it's not that the factories have shut down; it's just that they simply can't keep up with the demand at the moment, both in terms of firearms and ammunition. Which brings me to my last question. We have a lot of new gun owners in this country, and we've seen, I think, a great job by groups like NSSF, NRA, USCCA, as well as some individuals to really promote gun safety, the basic handling of firearms until folks can get to a range, till they can get that basic pistol course, to get that hands-on training. Online training is the best option for a lot of these folks. I'm curious your take on what happens to these new gun owners going forward, and what kind of role do you think that they will play in the Second Amendment debate in the future? I mean, are these folks the future of Second Amendment activism? And what about those folks who, that you've pointed out have tried to buy a firearm, but they simply can't? Are those going to be ardent activists for the right to keep and bear arms going forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? I mean, I think you've heard stories of a lot of people who've gone into gun stores over this time period. And by the way, my sources in the industry are telling me, they expect this month to have been one of the best, if not the best month ever for gun sales.
Yeah,
in this country, the way that things have gone over the last several weeks. But you've heard stories of a lot of people going into gun stores for the first time and not understanding the restrictions that are in place in a lot of states on how to buy a gun. I've talked to several people in New Jersey who were in the process, the months-long process to purchase a handgun in the state of New Jersey, and they, I just got a package delivered, I guess, but it's no contact delivery here for safety. But they have, they've been upset by the shutdown that affected them, because they couldn't get their guns that they wanted. I mean, they had started out the process, for months ago, and became more urgent in the last several weeks to want to be able to obtain their guns and couldn't. And you've heard the same story in places like California, where you've had gun store owners even put out videos talking about how people come in and they think they can just, a lot of people think you can just buy a gun online and have it shipped to your house, which you can't anywhere in the country. People think that they can somehow get around the 10-day waiting period in California or in Florida, which has a waiting period for handguns, and which I think they extend to all guns now, right? And so, you have a lot of new time buyers who have these misconceptions about how buying a gun in the United States works. Even in the states with a gun-friendly reputation, like Florida, and they're surprised by and upset by these restrictions at a time when they feel they really need to get a gun to protect themselves. And so I do think that is going to have an effect, because it makes the process less theoretical, obviously, and more practical when you are the one who has to go through it. And it really brings it to light for a lot of people how convoluted the process can be in certain states, and why you might want or need a gun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious to see what happens going forward, but I think that gun control advocates right now they're losing the argument. Clearly, I mean, again, as you say, I think it's likely we're going to see record high numbers of gun sales, many of them from first time purchasers. They're asking governors to shut down gun stores, and instead we're seeing the governors go by this DHS guidance and open gun stores up.
And I also just real quick, I think that the stance that a lot of these gun control groups are taking really gives away the game, I guess. Right? Like, I don't imagine that this is going to play out well for them PR wise after this crisis is over, because essentially what they're saying is, people shouldn't be allowed to buy a gun right now.
Right.
I mean, that's effectively the position that a lot of these groups have taken, which undercuts their whole branding effort in recent years to be about gun safety. Because, I mean, it's not as though they're just, like I said, the industry is okay with abiding by social distancing requirements, similar to like the Pennsylvania Supreme Court dissent said, well, look, restaurants can operate on a takeout basis or a limited basis like this. Why can't gun stores? And so instead of advocating for something like that, you see gun control groups advocating for just the total shutdown of all gun sales in a state. And really, I mean, presumably they would want that measure taken everywhere. which would
Well,
mean
absolutely
shut down the gun sales in the whole country. Which, I mean, how do you come back after this is over and say, oh, we're just interested in gun safety?
I think it's going to be very difficult. I mean, I've said for a couple of years now that their definition of gun safety is don't own a gun. And we're seeing that, right? I mean, that's exactly their attitude right now. They're encouraging governors to defy the DHS guidance and shut down gun stores at a time when more Americans than ever before want to have a firearm for personal protection. Their attitude is no. Let's make it impossible for people to do so. And you're right. That's not reasonable. That's not common sense. And it's certainly not about gun safety. That's as anti-gun as you can possibly get. And I think you're right. I think that this current crisis that we're in is been very revealing for the true motivations of gun control activists. Hey, listen, Stephen, I appreciate you coming on the program, sir. It's always good talking with you, and hopefully you get a chance to get outside and enjoy some fresh air and wave at people from a distance. But I'm glad we could talk today, man. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I hope the farm is doing well. All the goats and chickens and pigs that you got down there. At least you have some good company. Exactly. Yes, I can always, if nothing else, I can always go hang out with the goats. But maybe you know what? Maybe I can make a in-person delivery, but a contactless delivery. If you want to borrow a baby goat for a couple of weeks, just as like a therapy animal, we can probably arrange that. Is it house trained? Maybe not at all. You're on your own with that one. Steve Gutowski, the Washington Free Beacon. Thanks so much, man. We'll talk soon. All right, let's get to today's armed citizen story, our recidivist report, as well as our good deed of the day. We'll start with our recidivist report from Florida, where a man is accused of killing his girlfriend and another man shortly after bonding out of jail. Yeah, this is from Channel 10 News in Tampa, Florida, Dateline Lauman, Florida. Where a man who bonded out of jail just days ago, now accused of killing his girlfriend and another man, according to police, happened late Friday north of Davenport, Florida. 50-year-old Kenyatta Bellamy bonded out on March 24th from the Osceola County Jail on a charge of failure to appear for a DUI manslaughter case that had happened in early January 2018. According to police, he went home where he allowed his girlfriend to live while he was in jail and discovered that she was not alone. According to police, Bellamy reportedly called his mom, who lives in Miami, upset, said he wanted to take a bus to see her, but because of the coronavirus pandemic, he couldn't get there. Deputies say earlier in the day on Friday, Bellamy took the woman's young son to see family members, and during dinner, he complained to a cousin about the man living in his home. After dinner, Bellamy told his cousin to leave him at a gas station because he didn't want to go back to the house. At some point, however, Bellamy's cousin went to the home, smelled smoke at the front door, called 911. Bellamy later told deputies that he walked into the house, came across the woman and the man having sex. That's when he said he, quote, lost it. Said he used a hammer and a knife to kill the woman and the man, leaving the room after lighting a fire. Sheriff Grady Judd, in a news release, says if this suspect had remained in jail where he belonged, these two victims would still be alive. Plain and simple. Said we're still piecing together why, after spending almost a year in jail, he was allowed to bond out. It's an awful tragedy that never should have happened. Said Bellamy has a lengthy criminal history, including arrests in New York State for manslaughter and robbery in the 1990s. Since 2015, he's been arrested in Clearwater and Osceola County, the last again involving the manslaughter case. Now he's back in jail. 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted felony murder, 1 count of arson, and another count of tampering with evidence. And again, as Sheriff Judd makes clear, none of that would have happened had he simply remained behind bars where he should have been. Our armed citizen story comes from Chicago, where police say a gunman critically injured after the guys that he was shooting at returned fire. Those guys happen to be both concealed carry holders there in the state of Illinois. This from Channel 5 in Chicago. According to Chicago police, 2 men, 29 and 21 years of age, were driving in the southwest side of the city in the city's Scottsdale neighborhood. Sunday evening, another guy pulled out a gun, began shooting at the pair. Both men then pulled out their own firearms, striking the 47-year-old man multiple times. A man was shot in the abdomen, right torso, right leg, taken to Christ Hospital in critical condition. Neither of the concealed carry holders were injured in this incident. And again, they were acting in self-defense, so they aren't facing any charges. Our good deed of the day from the Toledo Blade, where a business is offering free cleanings to cars of first responders. This is a great story. I got to say, Bill Bonds is his name. Lives in Sylvania Township, co-owner of a Ziebert store there, and he's offering free sanitizing wipe down of vehicle interiors for first responders and medical professionals. This is fantastic. Mr. Bonds says, I know they're worn down. I know they're tired. I was given a chance to help to do something for those guys. According to the Toledo Blade, he quietly began offering the service about 3 weeks ago. His crews have wiped down about 300 vehicles since then. They use a sanitizing spray, clean all high-touch surfaces like the steering wheel, the dashboard, console, door handle, seatbelt clips. They pay attention to the plastic rear seats in the surrounding area and police cruisers. Bond says normal business has pretty much stopped, so this is a way to keep my guys getting a paycheck. Lieutenant Kelly Leonard with the Toledo Police Department says that Ziebert's donation is huge for us because they've offered to do it daily. It helps keep everybody safe, and it saves us time. Mr. Bond says most of the cars that his company's wiped down have stashes of sanitizing wipes and hand sanitizer instead, but he says they're using their own. Says they're trying to do their part too. With supplies running low, it's just so hard getting them. And so rather than having them spend their free time chasing down supplies, this keeps a lot of pressure off of them. So Bill Bonds there in Toledo, Ohio, and all of the workers there at Ziebert who are doing their part to help ensure that the first responders have a safe and healthy environment to operate in. We thank you for your very, very good deed. That is about all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program today. Don't forget to subscribe to YouTube. No, subscribe to Town Hall Media on YouTube. That way you never miss a program. Or if you like the audio version, you're on the go. I don't know where you'd be going these days, but if you're whatever, you don't want to look at the big beard, fine, that's fine. Bearing Arms Cam & Company on Apple Podcasts. Friday at noon, we're going to have a VIP Gold Editors Chat at Town Hall Media, so you can become a VIP member at bearingarms.com. And look forward to talking to y'all on Friday. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to send me an email, cam.edwards@bearingarms.com. Until we talk again, which should be tomorrow, be safe, be well, be free, and we'll see you here soon with another edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company.